In this insider-exclusive network TV special, Justice in America, Arnold de La Rosa's story, our news team is on location in Austin, Texas, meeting with Todd Kelly, partner at the Carlson Law Firm, to discuss the challenges and the strategies Todd and his firm are using to prove that Swift Transportation Company of Arizona is legally liable for Arnold de La Rosa's death, and knew or should have known they were overdriving their drivers, including Arnold, pushing them to exceed the federal maximum driving limits. On the morning of February 27, 2017, that practice of Swifts would cost Arnold his life. Arnold's commercial vehicle veered down an embankment, hit a concrete pillar, and quickly burst into flames, killing him upon impact. As with any legal case, there are always rules and regulations that govern drivers and their employers' liability, including wrongful deaths in cases like Arnold's, and this case against Swift is no different. Todd has earned a reputation as an unyielding trial lawyer who repeatedly represents individuals and families against big companies and the Goliaths of the world, and repeatedly wins. He has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Texas. Todd has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down, and his amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Austin, Texas. It is my great pleasure to introduce Todd Kelly to the show. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your firm.
I'm a board-certified trial lawyer. I have been practicing law for about 25 years, a little over. I work at the Carlson Law Firm. I manage the North Austin office of the Carlson Law Firm. We are predominantly a personal injury trial firm. We represent everything from car wrecks to sexual assault, human trafficking cases, and we have a few lawyers that actually do some mass tort cases. So we kind of run the gamut of personal injury. We have 14 offices in and around Texas, with one in Los Angeles, actually.
Today we are here discussing the tragic death of Mr. De La Rosa. Tell our audience who Arnold De La Rosa was.
Arnold De La Rosa was a truck driver who drove for Swift Trucking Company. He was on his way home after making a run, and Arnold is not here to tell us exactly what happened, but based upon the evidence that we've been able to review, it would appear that he was most likely fatigued based upon the number of hours that he had been driving, and unfortunately drove off of an overpass. It looks like he tried to correct as he was going over the overpass and actually ended up hitting the overpass on the far side and burned to death. He crashed in a fiery crash.
Let me ask you a question, because when you say this whole case is based, and we're going to talk about these issues, about overdriving the drivers. He worked for Swift, a transportation company, right, of Arizona.
It's interesting. Yes, Swift is based out of Arizona. In fact, their contract calls for Arizona jurisdiction. Kind of a little tricky how we got it into Texas, but yes, it's an Arizona company.
How do you track the hours that he has been working so you can use it in your case to say, hey, the company was making him drive more hours than what the federal law permits?
The trucks are equipped with what's called a Qualcomm, which basically is an electronic timing and distance device that registers the amount of hours that the truck is actually in operation. And so we were able to look at that data and reconstruct the route, the timing, and that sort of thing that Mr. De La Rosa was on the road.
So this is a case which revolves around, and you're going to explain the law to us, whether he was an employee or whether he was an independent contractor, and whether Swift Transportation is covered under the non-subscriber law. And what does that mean? Because from our investigation, we've seen that many and most companies are classified as non-subscribers in the state of Texas. What's that mean?
So a non-subscriber, it simply means that the company does not subscribe to workers' compensation coverage. And if a company chooses not to subscribe to workers' compensation coverage, then they're responsible for injuries that occur on the job. Now, one of the things that Mr. De La Rosa had done is he had signed what is called an independent contractor agreement. But both by the level of control that Swift exercised over Mr. De La Rosa, both telling him his hours, his routes, his loads, everything that they did, they exercised sufficient control to really make that contractor, that independent contractor agreement null and void. But even more than that, the federal motor carrier safety regulations basically dictate that a truck driver who is driving a load for a company cannot, by law, be an independent contractor. So when you have a situation like we have with Mr. De La Rosa, where no one could ever argue that this professional driver driving more than his allotted hours was not also negligent, he was. However, the trucking company is responsible by their own election to be a non-subscriber and to therefore save money by being a non-subscriber to workers' compensation.
So they don't have to pay the state.
Correct. They don't want to pay for the insurance. They don't want to pay for the coverage, and they take that risk. Now, what they've tried to do to shield that risk is, this independent contractor agreement, but it's null and void. And so when it becomes null and void, the company, if they are negligent at all, and they are, and we can show why, if they're negligent at all, they're responsible for the death, and so they're responsible for the entire thing.
So let me ask you, and it's interesting that you bring this up, because even if the employee, in this case De La Rosa, was 1% responsible for his own accident, the company still is 100% responsible for all the damages, right?
Correct. And actually, even if he is 75% responsible, based upon the election that the company chose to make, they are responsible 100%.
Now, where is this case in litigation?
So we have filed suit. They have filed a motion for summary judgment, meaning they've tried to dismiss the case based upon the issues that I've just talked about.
The contract that he signed said he was an independent contractor. But let me ask you a follow-up question on that. If they know what the federal law is, because they're represented by lawyers, right? Why are they even making this claim?
Oh, that would require me to get into the head of my enemy in a way that I have been unable to do. I honestly don't understand why they haven't just paid the claim. And I think there are factors that go into some of the laws that we have in Texas, the changes, the recent legislative sessions, all of those things. This case should have been paid years ago. I think the law is very clear. In fact, our response to their motion for summary judgment was a counter motion for judicial determination that there was no independent contractor status and that he was in fact an employee.
And that is still pending, or what?
It has not yet been heard. It's been fully briefed, set for oral argument, but we have not yet argued it.
Now, this is a big case because should you win this, it sets a precedent, right? Does it?
It sets a precedent against one of the nation's largest trucking companies, if not the largest trucking company in the nation. So yeah, it's a big case, and I think that has something to do with why they're fighting it as well.
So that would mean that every single independent contractor agreement that any driver signed with Swift is null and void.
It's interesting, you mentioned the Arizona affiliation with Swift, and initially the company called. There's an arbitration provision in the contract. And initially, the company's lawyers called and said, we're going to remove this. We want this to go into arbitration. And so our response was, well, we're not going to arbitrate. It's the arbitration provision is null and void under Arizona law, which you put in your contract. And they said, well, then we're going to remove it to, then we're going to remove it to federal court. I said, that's fine. You can remove it to federal court. And so they elected not to exercise that arbitration provision, knowing that if they exercise that provision, we would exercise the choice of law provision and go back to Arizona, who does not recognize arbitration in an employment context. that kind of goes to why we're still in Texas and why we're still in court.
Okay. Now, your claim is wrongful death. What are the damages of a case like this? A man lost his life. He was kind of in his prime working time, wasn't he?
He was. He was providing for his family. He was providing, and truck drivers make a good living. And so he was providing, so you got the loss of wages. You've got what's called a loss of consortium. That's a loss of, just the companionship and the love and support, both for his wife, but also for his children. His children, he has adult children, but he also has minor children who will now grow up without the benefit of having their father in the home. And certainly with what we're seeing in the world today, the loss of a father in the home can have a significant impact on the growth of that family.
Is this measurable? How is it measured, in dollars and cents?
The way that I would measure a case like this is when you look at the number of trucks that Swift has on the road, and you look at the number of people that are put at risk by Swift's actions, because in this case, Arnold de La Rosa was the only person to be hurt or killed. But had there been someone else on that road that he drove off onto, had there been other people near where that truck exploded, those people were at risk. There are 344 million people in this country that get on our roadways. Swift puts every single one of us at risk every day by this kind of action. So what is 344 million people worth?
Is it possible that this case could be settled prior to going to trial, and the fact of the issue of being an independent contractor, which violates federal law, could never be addressed?
It is not only possible, I expect that after this summary judgment is heard, that we will likely have more significant conversations about resolution. My clients have already expressed a willingness to be reasonable. We just haven't seen a reasonable offer from the defense at this point in time.
Any other comments that you want to add on this case?
Yeah, I think that, we've talked today about Swift Trucking Company, but Swift is not alone. They're one of the leaders in the trucking industry. And if the leaders in the trucking industry are acting this way, what do you think the smaller trucking companies are doing?
Right. It would seem to me that any trucking company facing the fact that they would have to change all of their employee statuses would not want this to go to court. For that very reason.
I think you're right.
I want to thank you for being on the program, and good luck with hopefully settling this case.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.